Purpose is a journey, and we are here today to continue the exploration and curiosity about the alignment of how entrepreneurial people find themselves. Now, to me, purpose is about two things. Firstly, who we become on the journey, and secondly, how that affects others around us. I'm Suzy Sanders. I'm the founder of Alchemy Virtual Assistants, and today I'm your host, guiding you through another tale of purpose. And I've got a really special treasured guest with me today who's kindly agreed to give up some time to crack into her story and what purpose means to her. And I've got Hati here, and Hati is incredible. I've known Hati for many, many years, and what inspires me the most is Hattie's clearly got the commercials and the financials down in business because she's worked for some really well-known brands, household names in a role of finance director most recently. And she's recently given that all up, bought a farm, and she's focusing on sustainable, local grown flowers from a beautiful part of Wales. So Hattie, thank you for joining me today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Suzy. What an intro.
Well, I don't know if I did it justice, because one of the we used to work together many moons ago, didn't we? And we left that company and went on our separate journeys, and I know we've always kind of kept in touch, and I was really excited when you said you'd come and talk to me, because we were talking about this earlier. You've had finance director roles, you've worked for brands like Here We Flow, Candy Kittens, Heineken, Dairy Crest, really well-known brands, running a lot of the really crucial finance functions, and then you've just gone and bought a flower farm. And to me, it makes complete sense. But on paper, it could be quite a jump. So I'm really curious to explore how your purpose has driven you through that part of your life, and how that's going to impact in your future.
Yeah, well, one thing I ought to correct is that I didn't buy the flower farm. It actually belongs to my other half, which is quite an important part of the story and the journey to where I am, to be honest.
Amazing.
So
another power couple taking on the entrepreneurial world.
Something like that. I'm not sure we feel like a power couple. We more feel like a slightly bedraggled, exhausted couple that don't get to do things like go on holiday or anything like that. But yes, it has certainly been a journey to get here.
Oh. So I'd like to start with one of my favourite questions, Hattie, if I may, with what does purpose mean to you?
Very good question. And yeah, it's a tricky one, because I feel like purpose is such a complex sort of thing to really nail what it means to you, and probably means so many different things to different people. I'm a human being that always is driven by something. I'm quite blinkered in my approach to stuff. I think it's very irritating for people around me because they can't get in because I'm very kind of laser focused, probably verging on obsessive sometimes, but I also work very hard not to let it take over completely. But yeah, purpose, I suppose I have to have a purpose. I have to have something that I'm striving for, that I'm aiming for. So I think that's what purpose means to me. It's having, this is whether it's the goal or the dream, or, you know, whatever it is that you've got this imagination of where you're trying to get to, and focusing on it. And that's my purpose. And I'm a woman that never felt that having a family was something that I wanted to do. So actually that's important, because starting my own business was almost a bit of a landmark, if you like, as to what is my purpose. I asked that question when I was approaching the big 4-0, which I wasn't grumpy about. I was happy to embrace. But I thought, if I'm not having a family, if I'm not doing that, and I'm not procreating and leaving something behind, what am I leaving behind? And that was what really triggered me to want to do something that was that was mine for me. So all the blood, sweat, and tears was for something that I was creating.
Wow. My goodness, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because when you were speaking then, I was like, okay, so the link between like purpose seems to be your motivation or your fuel that's kind of driving you forward. And I was gonna ask, when did you decide that the flower farm was your thing? What point was there a defining moment? Was it a kind of muddled coming together? Like what, how did you arrive, you and your partner arrive at that decision that that was going to be your thing?
I think it was a bit of an evolution. Um, you mentioned that sort of my past and sort of CV, if you like, has been in finance. And where I found myself was I felt like I was the finance director for a really cool business. And at the time that I landed that job at Candykins, that was my dream. That was what I'd been striving for until that point. Um, and COVID kind of changed that. And COVID changed that because I ended up not living in my flat in London and visiting the farm in Wales where my boyfriend was. We were long distancing. I ended up living on the farm in Wales and working remotely. And that's actually how I started my role at Candykins. So when things started to kind of evolve and change back to having to go back into London and driving up and down the M4 many times, listen to a lot of podcasts and audiobooks, I started to feel like life's really long just doing this over and over again, just hitting that repeat button. And I want to do something that's kind of, well, it sounds really selfish, but that's for me. If I'm putting in this much of myself, and I've always been somebody that has put in huge effort into whatever job that I've done, and that's generally why I see the or why I've kind of achieved the levels of success, which is all relative success, but the levels of success that I achieved were due to effort, not brilliance. And that's not being modest. That's I didn't go to university. I did everything in a really sort of shonky, roundabout way. I did my professional qualifications. And I had to work really hard to be able to be recognised as a finance director. So to let go of that was quite a big thing, to let go of that kind of status. So that was a big part of the decision. Which I'm not a status driven person, so that surprised me. But I was proud of what I'd achieved to get to there because I suppose that had been my purpose. Like my purpose was to be successful at what I was doing. So yeah, I guess suddenly things had become different. I'd had this taste of what life, even though I worked throughout the whole of 2020, long hours sitting in this little corner here, which is actually a sitting room come office. We set up a vegetable garden. I started growing some cut flowers. It was the only thing that we could do because we had land. We were very lucky. We could sort of walk about on the farm, and we didn't feel locked down as such. But this was our little bubble. This was the space that we had. So I think that started my little brain taking over, thinking, well, if I'm going to do something, I want to do something where the business has a bit of a purpose, and we're using the land that we have here. At that point, it was just used as grazing for sheep. We don't farm; it's just sort of small holding, and we have a small number of sheep which keep the land, you know, it ticking over. And I thought, what if we could do something more exciting with this land? I don't know why, I just had this feeling that it would be something that was about like growing something. So something kind of horticultural. And I thought about sort of growing plants and plant nursery and what infrastructure we would need. And then I said to my other half, I think I want to do cut flowers. And he said, don't be ridiculous. Do you know where we live? It like rains all the time here in Wales. It was like red rag to a bull, Suzy. So I think he's now realised that in fact it's hard. It's hard to make a living out of. But the interest that I've seen in my business, both as a local part of a local community, and also just generally like selling to florists and florists loving the flowers that I produce, because my attention to the quality of the flowers is like switched on, because I don't want to be seen as somebody that's just growing a few things in their garden. I want to be seen as a business that's growing locally grown flowers, sustainably. That was the purpose of the business. So I'm hoping that the business will, at the very least, not contribute to destroying of our planet, that it will at least be neutral without doing too many, planting trees somewhere that we don't know. And there are many businesses doing that. But I think for me, it's about keeping small, keeping local, going back to community, local community. And yeah, that's sort of how we
Oh,
got here.
so many things there. I'm going, yeah, yeah, I get that. Firstly, like my career has been very disjointed. I didn't go to university because, quite frankly, I didn't know what I wanted to do at that point, and I couldn't make that huge commitment. But and that kind of that drive for success and finding some things in the evolution of your business that surprised you as well. Like, I know you're incredibly talented at what you do and who you are. You're the way that you have brought in so many creative ideas to follow that purpose is remarkable. And I love that red rag to a bull moment as well. Like, I think every business owner that I've had the privilege of meeting has kind of had that point. And it's interesting to hear your perspective on lockdown as well, because I think so many people had that realization. To use your words, life's very long when you're just kind of going through those motions. And I think the whole challenge of navigating COVID gave us all that opportunity to reflect on actually what is meaningful for me. And I you used the word selfish, which I'm going to compassionately challenge there, Hattie, about wanting to create something for yourself. And I know you're 110% kind of girl. I am too. I'm all in. If I'm doing something, I'm all in. And I think that's a very common driver and trait I see in a lot of the small businesses that I have the privilege of working with. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes that can be quite, in my experience, that can be quite challenging, because when you're hyper focused, you're passionate, you're clear on your purpose, and you're moving towards something that you're creating, it's easy to get overwhelmed, and it's easy to get burnt out and exhausted. And and I'm wondering, because you are at the whim of Mother Nature to some respects, as well as running and building a business. You're arguably doing one of the harder routes, in that you're relying on Mother Nature, things growing. Like, there's so much that you've got to get in place, move with. You mentioned the infrastructure. There's so much to do, but there's got to be a layer of trust there as well, that the flowers are going to grow. I know you're very seasonal, but there's so much there that I'm already thinking I would have anxiety. I think I'd be going to bed at night saying, what happens if my peonies don't grow? Or how, is that a true reflection? Do you feel some of those things? And if so, how do you navigate that?
Oh, with great difficulty, Suzy. I just to For those that don't know, you probably do know, but I'm a planner. I'm a right. This is what's going to happen. This is all scheduled in, and my way of up until now, the way that I've coped with kind of anxiety or yeah, nervousness or feeling overwhelmed, take a step back and plan it out. Write it all down, get it clear what's your plan of action. You've correctly identified that the plan of action can be changed like that because it rained and all the peony petals fell off. or it was blistering sun and that day you were out delivering and you couldn't pick the flowers at the moment that they needed to be picked. So it really is a knife edge, and there are so many people will fall asleep if I list all of the kind of variable factors within flower farming. But how I cope with it is a journey. I'm not 100% there. But what I have started to try to do is to put trust in, I don't know what it is, but put trust in it and say, it will be okay. Things will go wrong. And instead of being prepared, I'll have to have, these are the contingencies. If all the peonies, to go with that example, all the peonies get ruined and they were supposed to be going for a wedding, you've got to know that you've got either other flower farmers locally that might be able to supply to you, or like there'll always be a backup plan. And I try to create the backup plan and not dwell on it. It's just there. It's my safety net if I need it. I don't want to use it, but I might have to. And you have to roll with it. And I talk quite a lot, or I've started to talk a lot on my social media about playing the glad game. I think that I'm probably the only person that knows what this is. Me and my sister used to watch Pollyanna as a kid quite regularly. It was an old Disney film. If you haven't seen it, definitely recommend. And she was an orphan and she played the glad game. She obviously had, not a lot of joy in her life, so she would choose something to feel glad about on that day. And that is, like, no word of a lie, that is how I get through some of the things, because you walk out to the field and you see a crop that's been eaten by slugs overnight. You have to look at it. I may have a cry, but you've got to go and find something and say, yes, but that's doing really well. I'm choosing to be happy about the fact that that's doing well. That's over. What's my contingency plan? It's a work in progress. I haven't got it right, and believe me, there have been many tears and tantrums. There will be many more, but that's me kind of using my own toolkit and maybe adding a few little bits and thinking, how can I flex? But the trust is a big thing. I could tie myself up in knots. I could make myself sick with anxiety thinking, what if? Because I'm a what if person. I have to almost force myself to not do that, but know that there is a backup plan, even if it's not as good as what you want to happen.
Yeah. And business is about mitigating, managing risk, isn't it?
Yeah.
I would, in my personal opinion, I would see your business as the most intense version of that. I really would. But it is about having the contingency and as you say, the network, the support, the community. And I know I've seen from your socials and when we've spoken prior about some of the things that you're doing in your local community, and that support and really helps the contingency, but it helps with the anxiety as well, doesn't it? Because there are other local growers who are taking a similar approach to you with the sustainability front and the importance on quality, and then they're having their peonies eaten overnight as well. Like it's that support network as well as
100%.
the practical business delivery. It's the, oh my god, I'm going to go insane because this has happened. And thank you for being so open. I love the glad game. I've not heard of it in that context before, but Paul, who's my husband and Alchemy's managing director, we play best case, worst case. So I'm the same as you. I'm a what if, and honestly, if you need a problem finding, ask me. I'll look for it. Like that's the way I operate. But we play the best case, worst case. So if I'm like spiraling on a potential issue, Paul is a really helpful accountability partner with that. Okay, so what's the best thing that could happen here? And it's like, oh, okay, I know I need to look at both because I spend half my life catastrophizing. So having that kind of ability to stop and go, what's going well? What am I glad for? What am I grateful for? Like, I think that's really, really important. And I don't think anyone's got that cracked, have they?
If they have, I want to know who they are.
Oh my goodness. So your business is now going to be your life's work, right? That's your legacy. It's for you, your partner, the impact that you're making to others, who you're becoming on the journey. So what's your vision for the farm?
I always struggle with these types of questions because whilst I'm a planner, I'm a short-term planner. So it's a bit like being in an interview and being asked, like, what's the 5-year dream job? And I'm like,
Oh,
oh.
well, I can scrap that question off. Let's pull it back. Let's talk a little bit more short term. What I mean, what's
I think I do know I do have an answer for it, sort of broadly. I would love for my business to be if somebody in Wales in the floristry industry or that's looking for wedding flowers or um yeah wants or follows on social, like who should you follow on social media? I want the Dahlia Wood to be that business. It's tall order. There are lots of smaller growers, and I want to be the biggest fish in the small pond, not necessarily in terms of size of revenue. That's almost less important, weirdly, from my background. It's
I was going
about
to say?
the business making an impact and being known for doing beautiful floristry work, which is something was a complete surprise to me that I love doing. And I can feel myself kind of getting into the creative side of things and loving what I'm producing, which is a bold statement, but I do. Like, I create something and I'm in love with it. And I think if you're sending that out to a bride, something that you love, and you listen and you take their input and then create something with that, that's a really special thing. So I'd love for that side of the business to really take off, and for the growing side, I guess, to be this sort of, for people to say, oh, I'm going to Clandilo, and someone say, oh, the Dahlia Wood's there, and because it's a bit of a tourist destination, for people to want flowers from me because it's the Dahlia Wood. They're the ones for the best Welsh flowers. So I haven't quite got the kind of the tagline and the what does that look like for my overall business vision, but that's what it means. That's really the goal, I think.
Oh, well, I have no doubt that goal will be slowly trickling into transition as and what maybe a slightly off topic question, but what's your favourite flower?
Oh, it's the worst question because I just can't decide. Dahlias, obviously, I named the business the Dahlia Wood, and it has accidentally become a Dahlia Wood. Dahlias don't grow in woodland. However, we're surrounded by woodland, so the flower field is like we're in this little Dahlia Wood, which is pretty cool because that was the name sort of formed from other ideas. Um, my favourite, I think I'm going to have to say roses, but I don't know. I mean, if you follow me on social media, I change. It's whatever is just blowing my mind at the time. I'm quite fickle. And I guess because of the seasonality of flowers and the fact that the business is about growing flowers that grow when they grow, not forcing them. Um, Everything's transient, and that's why everything's my favorite, right? Because the tulips come and they're just such a joy because we've waited all winter for the first beautiful, like, flouncy colours and blooms, and they arrive, so they're my favourite. And then you move and you get the ranunculus, and they're just perfection, but they don't have a scent. And it goes on, and it just goes throughout the whole year. And at the end of the year, you finish with the chrysanthemums, which people have this idea of a chrysanthemum being like a very bog standard thing, but some of the chrysanths that we grow are just incredible, and they end up being a favourite. Because at that time everything's winding down, so you're like treasuring everything. So yeah, I think the transient nature is such a huge part, and getting helping people to remember that instead of wanting something that we put on our side and it stays there forever. is a really sort of big part of the business and the business kind of mission, I think, for all small local growers, to be able to remind people that flowers shouldn't last forever. If they do, they're not behaving naturally. So yeah.
Oh, Hattie, I'm so glad I asked. I mean, I was curious, but I'm so glad I asked because your answer has just reminded me. And I had this conversation with my son recently. Like, my kid's literally addicted to strawberries, and they will snaffle a whole punnet in seconds. And we were having conversations about, actually, when they're best is when we can go to the farm and pick them ourselves, and we seasonality. And you took me on a little mini journey then, because you're right, like the spring flowers, it's not just the flower, is it? It's a reminder of the winter that's passing, the seasons that are changing, and all of those beautiful kind of spirals and seasons that we all experience. It's a reminder of that. It's not just the flower. And
So
that's
true.
yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. And I'm fickle too. I don't think I have a favourite flower, but I clearly don't have the connection and the passion that you do as well. And I know we've mentioned weddings. I know you've started doing some kind of workshops in your local community, and
I love
obviously
the
people.
workshops.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I'm really annoyed that we live so far away, because I follow you on social. I'm like, oh my God, that looks amazing.
They're so cool. They're such a nice way of connecting with people. Um, and I mean, obviously, it's always it's a good leveler, I've found so far. I'm sure sometime I'll get somebody that'll complain and won't like something. But up until now, people turn up and they just are in awe of these flowers. And for me, it's just such a lovely thing to be able to see the joy that the flowers are bringing, because it makes it feel worthwhile. You know, it's hard, it is hard work what we're doing. And to be able to see, like, that's why we do it. It's that smile, or that, like, people get like almost entranced by them. um and you know me, I've always been like that sort of peoply person. I love to chat on, and like, I've always been I was an unusual finance person because I loved getting up and presenting stuff and trying to make the facts and figures sound fun and interesting. And as my career evolved through that, what the favorite thing to do was to teach the junior team members why finance isn't frightening. Anyone can learn it. It doesn't matter if you think you're number blind, or it, any of the many things that people have as like hang-ups about numbers. Learn some simple rules, and you can understand the basics, and you can pick out the important information. And I think it's being able to then incorporate some of that sort of teaching. um, People are definitely more receptive being taught about flowers than about numbers, but it's such a lovely thing to be able to, yeah, to share the joy that I get from them, and to help people to who already love them to be able to enjoy them even more. So yeah, thanks for bringing up the workshops, because I love them.
Oh, well, thank you for like articulating so beautifully the link between finance and flowers. And joy, joy, you've mentioned joy quite a few times today. That's got to be a big part of your purpose then, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think it is, and I talk a lot about. I can't remember the name of the lady that does it bring you joy, and you have to chuck it out or keep it. But I was onto joy way before she was talking about it, Susie.
You heard it here first, folks. I love that. It's sorry, I feel like I'm kind of cutting you there, but it's a conversation I've had countless times in recent weeks with people that were interested in exploring taking on an alchemy virtual assistant franchise. And I found myself coming back to this: just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And
Yeah,
and I think a lot, I know I didn't have a connection to that kind of ethos, if you like, when I started my business, because there's so much to do. You've got to find clients, you've got to build so much. I'd lost sight of the connection to that joy in the early days, and for me, choice is a big part of that. When
yeah.
you run your own business and you're putting in the blood, sweat, and tears, you're allowed to feel good about it, right? That's the
I hope
point.
so. Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. I Because otherwise, what is the point in it? Like, you're not, if you're working and working, and I do have to check myself, because you can get, we're still in the setup phase. We're in year two. We're about to come up to the second anniversary of the business, but really last year was the first. So the spring of last year was the first proper year. Um, so everything still feels so new. There's so much learning happening. That's a brain drain, isn't it? Everything learning. I love learning things, but it takes a huge amount of my battery power. Um, the physical battery power required, and I feel like I'm constantly playing a game of whack-a-mole, where I organize one thing and I go into another area, because I've got it's sort of multi-sited is a bit fancy, but I've got like the main field, I've got one big polytunnel down there, I've got another one up by the house, and then we're actually putting up a third one as we speak. um, I've got bruises on my hands from yesterday to prove it. It's physically exhausting, and you go and you focus for the whole day on something, and then I'll go into the other tunnel where all the seedlings are, and they're dried out, and they all look like they're gonna like keel over, and because you can't physically keep on top of everything as one person. Um, so if you don't get joy out of what you do when it's that hard, you need to stop. So I do have to often sort of step back and say, that's not going so well. How do we make it better? Fix it short term. What's the contingency? Always a contingency. And then focus on that and what went well. Back to the glad game, the joy. That's yeah. That it's my coping mechanism, 100%.
Yeah, and I love the whack-a-mole because I mean that's what starting a business is, right? It's a game of dealt with that, dealt with that. Something else is coming up. That's a really beautiful expression of actually what it's like. But you only ever get more skilled as time goes on. You only get more experience, more wise, and that kind of comes back to my point of who we become on the journey is really just as important as the other stuff. Oh, I mean, I could probably keep you here for another 6 weeks talking about this kind of stuff, but you've got seedlings and flowers to attend to and bruises,
That is true.
literal bruises. I'm grateful that the bruises acquired from my business growth and journey are not physical.
I don't know. I think sometimes the physical ones are less painful.
Oh my goodness. But what's the best way for people to connect with you?
um, Social media, I would say. My main platform is Instagram. I love Instagram. So yes, people can definitely find and connect with me. It's still me running my Instagram. One of the many other things that I have to do. I do have a wonderful lady, Laura, who helps part time, and she's doing a lot of the content. But I am still on there answering things. So yeah, it's a good connecty platform. Um, and yeah, Facebook as well, but Insta is my fave. I love it, and I think it works so well for the business because it's such a visual. And yeah, I do sometimes think, again, how lucky am I to have something that is so easy to Instagram about, because every day there's something new and beautiful to share. So yeah, I would say that's the best. But we have a website as well, and email and that kind of thing. But I'd highly recommend, if you like flowers, go and give us a follow on Insta.
Absolutely, and we will make sure that we get some links put in as well. Because I mean, just like yeah, yeah. I'm visualizing your Instagram now, and I always get excited when I see your content coming up because it is very joyful by nature. But yes, so we'll pop some links in. Hattie, I'm so grateful for having this conversation with you today. And we've kind of weaved all over the places I knew we would, but I know there's a lot here that I've resonated with, and I know other aspiring and established business owners and entrepreneurs will resonate. I am going to leave you to play whack-a-mole.
Thanks.
Chasing the joy, playing the
Yeah.
glad game. Thank you for being here, Hattie, and thank you for sticking with us through another conversation as we've explored what purpose means to others. And I'll catch up with you again soon. Take care.